welcome to Beth and Missy Talk. Today we're lucky to be talking to Lorena Hirsch, who's been treating both sexual offenders and survivors of sexual abuse for well over 20 years, I'd say. So thank you for being with us, Lorena. Today we're going to be talking to Lorena about how and when you talk to your children about sex. I think that's a question that probably a lot of parents wonder about. I know I've gotten questions about it, and you are the expert. So what do you think, Lorena? When and how do you talk to your children about sex?
Well, that is a question that I've encountered quite a bit, and it seems like parents are very uncomfortable talking to their children about sex, and so they want to wait until the right time. And unfortunately, as children grow older, parents kind of lose credibility with them. So when they're very little, they think their parents know everything, and then when they start to reach adolescence, parents know nothing. And so it's about that time that parents want to start talking to them about sex, and that's too late. It's really important to start, and I don't want to call it conversation, but talk about sex and sexuality early on, as early as possible. Give them the appropriate language when they're first learning to speak. So they're calling body parts by their technical terms and not by some silly name that we attribute to different parts. And when we're doing that, we're teaching them that we're comfortable and we're open to hearing their questions and answering their questions. But when we're calling body parts by silly names, what we're communicating to children is that we are not comfortable talking about sex and sexuality, and so then we are no longer safe people for them to talk to when there's a problem.
That's really interesting. Would you say, even bath time at toddlers or 3-4 years old, that you'd want to start talking about body parts and then boundaries, maybe even who has access to those parts, what that might look like?
Yeah. Body parts and touching rules, and that there are no secrets about touching.
Secrecy is important, right? And so if your children, how would you guide them if they were in a situation that, what would that look like? We know that most offenders are usually either in the family or close friends. So what would you say, I guess, or how would you guide parents to talk to their kids about Uncle so-and-so, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good point. When children are younger, if they're going to be molested, it's most likely going to be by somebody very close to them. As they get older, there's a greater risk of them being molested outside of the home. But in those younger years, it's most likely going to be somebody close to them. And so I would encourage parents to teach children that there are touching rules and that they get to control touching, and they always get to say no to any kind of touch. They don't have to go kiss grandma goodbye. They get a choice in that, but mainly that there are rules about touching, and we never ever keep secrets from mom and dad about touching.
Right. What about as kids get older and you might meet resistance with adolescents or teenagers? Do you stop the conversation, or do you just still do kids hear you even though they don't want to? Or what are your thoughts on even teenagers? Now there's Snapchat and these apps, and what do you think about, what advice would you give parents as teenagers get older?
Never stop the conversation.
Right? Okay.
I think it needs to be going on constantly. And if they recognize that you're comfortable talking to them about sex and sexuality and you are a resource for them, then they're not as likely to shut down or shut you out. So kids are unfortunately being educated sexually by pornography and social media, and I think it's really important for parents to step in and start becoming more of a resource to children, and that means talk to them.
What would you give parents? Are there websites or resources or books? Are there good books out there that you would recommend parents look to or purchase if it's an uncomfortable thing sometimes? So what would you recommend? Books wise, or education for parents?
One of my favorite books is by Jan Hyman, and unfortunately she passed away, and it's out of print, but it's called There Is No Sex Fairy, and that gives you a resource for what she referred to as the 10 Commandments for teaching children about sexually respectful behavior. But there's another really great kids book called A Very Touching Book that she also wrote, and it's got a great little quiz in it. It talks about the touching rules and goes over body parts, and encourages children to have more of a dialogue with parents about body parts so that they can see that their parents are comfortable talking about those things. So those are two really great resources. There's a website also by Marie Crabb, and she's an Australian researcher that did some really great work on the impact of pornography on children, and she's got all kinds of resources available to educators and to parents, and her website is called It's Time We Talked.
Okay, that's really useful. I think because if you didn't grow up in a household where your parents were comfortable talking about it, it's probably hard for you to talk to your kids about it, but we definitely have to. I think it's really important. So thank you. I think this is really useful information. Thank you, Lorena.
Thank you.